Okay, well, good morning. Welcome to our sixth episode of our Global Connect webinar series. My name is Ora Lopez, and I am excited to be joined today with an audience from really all over the world, in addition to, of course, our panel of Cleveland Clinic and global leaders. In the next hour, this lineup of panelists will share with you about their careers as well as their leadership journeys. This will also be followed by some time for you to ask some questions. So to be honest, we ask that you submit your questions not till the end of this webinar, but that you present your questions as those come up. And we will try to weave those questions into the discussion so that you can get, so that we can get to your questions. In our panel today, I am delighted and happy to share that we are joined by three key individuals that I've had the opportunity to meet throughout my career, but also amazing human beings. And I am hopeful that the energy that each one of them brings and that they are known for, right, it's also contagious through video. So for starters, we have Dr. Beri Ridgeway. She is the chair of our Women's Health Institute, and she's also our Associate Chief of Staff. We also have Dr. Brian Donley, our CEO for Cleveland Clinic London. And we have Malek Almoosa, who is CEO of the Almoosa Specialist Hospital in Saudi Arabia, and whom I know for probably 10 plus years. And lastly, but not least, our moderator will be Mike Kessel, who you also see in video right now, and he's our president and CEO for Cleveland Clinic Canada. So with that said, Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Ora. I really appreciate it. And a couple quick thank yous here. Number one, to you, Ora, and the Global Executive Education and Learning Operations team. Both yourself and Matthew Polevko have done an outstanding job of coordinating this today and this series, which is outstanding. So a big thank you. The second thank you is to, there are actually 32 countries on right now, showing the global reach of this organization and the friends of this organization. So that's, to the best of my knowledge, I think that's close to 15% of all the countries that are out there in the world. So thank you to the hundreds and hundreds of people from 32 countries joining, and a special thank you for the folks from Lebanon that have joined us. Our heart goes out to you, and for you to join today is extremely meaningful. And thank you, thank you, thank you. So this is an incredible group and a great opportunity for all of us to learn. So I'm Mike Kessel, as Ora mentioned. I'm the president and CEO of Cleveland Clinic Canada. I'm thrilled to be with you here all today as we discuss the less explored sides of leadership, the role that failure and adversity play long-term in career growth, and how this panel of leaders has navigated organizational and personal difficulties throughout their tenure. Leadership is often viewed with prestige, importance, and many times leaders are treated as celebrities within their own organizations. But today, we will dive further into why these perceptions of leaders are not always the reality of the role. So I'm going to open it up. So we're all friends here. So all of my guests have agreed to be called by their first name, which will also speeds things up, which is nice. So thank you, Beri, Brian, and Malek for joining and allowing that to occur. I'm going to open it up with a fun question, okay? And so the fun question is, and I'm going to ask myself the question, and then we're going to hear from you. Tell us something that's fun or different about you that few people may know. And mine is, my family passed down two traditions to me. Okay, my 101-year-old grandfather passed down the love of Scrabble, the board game. Okay, I love it. And my father, I'm born and raised in Chicago, moved to Toronto 10 years ago. My father was a Chicago Public League table tennis champion. So he passed down table tennis / ping pong to me. And I plan to pass that down to my kids as well. So that is my fun fact about me. Why don't we turn it over? Beri, would you like to go first in your fun fact?
Sure, happy to. Something that people don't know about me probably is that I was a very competitive swimmer for most of my life, and I even played water polo in college. So knowing me and people would probably not guess that unless they knew me as a younger person. And I've passed along that love of swimming to my kids, at least recreationally.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Brian, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I guess well, I would tell you that maybe people don't know is I'm a very avid Broadway fan. And so love Broadway. We oftentimes when we lived in Cleveland would travel to New York. We have actually passed it on to our children. And then what's really been nice with the move to London, we're now within walking distance of the West End, so we can continue that passion. So yeah, it's been a great thread throughout life. And it's exciting to see our three boys also take some life to that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Malek?
For me, thank you first, Mike, for the invitation. For me,
Of course.
I love calligraphy, as you can see from my back painting. I love calligraphy. But the same side, I have the worst maybe font in ever you can see. So my handwriting is the worst. So I tried so many times. I love it. I like it. I like artists, but I tried it so many times, but I failed. But I'm still trying.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Okay. So I'm going to go back to Beri. Beri, what's the worst job you've ever had? And remember, this is a no holds bar, transparent, honest. Give us the worst job you've ever had.
Well, I'm going to take it really far back here. I've had a job on and off since I was 10 years old. And when I was about 11 or 12, my mother agreed for me to do a job which involved delivering real estate newsletters to the neighborhood. And to top it off, I earned 2.5 cents for every newsletter that I had to deliver house to house. And so about every month or so, I'd get a check for a little under $3. And I despised it, and it's been uphill since then.
That's great. I love it. Brian, what about you?
Actually, one of my summer jobs, my father would help me figure out something to do in the summer. And so I was all lined up to work at a hamburger place. And he said he had a better opportunity. He wanted me to drive downtown. I grew up in Pittsburgh to meet someone. So I went down to meet the person. She ended up being a pathologist, and it was a job to work in the hospital. I was in medical school. I thought, this is great. How wonderful my father is. And then I found out the job was to work as a autopsy room assistant. And so I said, there's absolutely no way I'm doing that. Thank you so much. They called the next day, and similar to you, Beri, I think it was 50 cents an hour more than flipping hamburgers. And I said, I'm in. Man, I'll do that for sure. It was all about the 50 cents an hour. And so I worked in the autopsy room for 3 years.
Oh, geez. 3 years. That's a nice time, actually. Malek, yourself?
I worked in the same organization for the last 13 years or 14 years, but probably 1 year of that was the worst year of it because I had so much difficulties. I was appointed the CEO at that time, so it was the worst actually year ever. So it was a difficult time. We had an outbreak of coronavirus, our own coronavirus. It's a different version, the Middle East coronavirus. And we suffered a lot. I was also recently married, so it was really a difficult time. So probably that time was the worst time ever.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Beri, can you think of a defining moment in your leadership or career that has impacted the way you lead today?
The defining moment was definitely when I did some work in getting to really know myself and understand what my strengths are and in what area that would match. And that's not something that I think is always intuitive. We, especially in medicine or in other corporate careers, get on a path where you're kind of going along a conveyor belt to next position without taking that step back and reflecting on where you excel as well as what feels good and makes you happy. And I definitely took that opportunity and was more previously on an educational track, which I did enjoy, but had some struggles and didn't align really with my skill set. And when I moved really to more administrative roles, I found I was so much happier. My skills were better, and then it's allowed me to excel.
That's great. So quick follow-up to that. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self? Now, you're very young right now, but you're going to have to go back younger.
Knowing what I know now, I would tell myself to listen to myself. I think in retrospect, I can look back and I can see a number of instances where I had ideas for certain things, and some people discouraged me and said, that's really not the best path for you, or that's not the right research question, which ultimately I think were lost opportunities. I think it's important to listen to others, but take all of that advice into context with yourself and how you feel and how you know yourself. And that's, I would tell myself to listen to myself and then stay true.
That's good. That's good advice. Brian, can you think of a defining moment in your leadership past that has impacted the way you lead today?
Yeah, Mike, I probably have several. And so if I choose one, I would think of years ago when I was president of one of our regional hospitals here in Cleveland. I started there in the hospital, and I am an orthopedic surgeon and really didn't know anything about running a hospital. And so what I did is I went out and met with every single manager to try to understand what their job was and what they did. One of the places I went was to Central Sterilization. This was in a hospital of 1,000 people, about 8 operating rooms. It wasn't a really big hospital. I met a gentleman there named Quentin. And Quentin ran Central Sterilization, and the job of Central Sterilization is to make sure all the instruments are clean when they come to the operating room. Critically important. So I've done many surgeries over my years. You absolutely rely on these people, because if they come up, they're not clean, you can't do the surgery on the patient. You sit there and wait. So it's a critical part of the hospital. And I asked Quentin and the team, as I asked every manager, what are the things that can help you be better at your job? We talked it through. They needed actually a phone moved from one wall to another, so they didn't have to keep running over to get the phone while they're trying to do their job. We finished this all up, and Quentin comes up and gives me this really big hug. And I was new, and I was like, this is kind of awkward. I didn't know that you get hugs. And I always make a joke that I asked our HR person, hey, am I allowed to hug people? But what Quentin said to me was, Quentin said, I've worked in Central Sterile Supply for 20 years in this hospital, and no doctor has ever talked to me.
Wow. Wow.
And that was a defining moment for me to realize how many people are working so hard every day for you as a leader to accomplish the goals that you set out, and how important it is to go and listen and give respect to every person in the organization. It was a real defining moment for me.
Yeah, that's just a great story, Brian. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll go off script for a second, so hopefully I don't get anybody in trouble here. But it does seem to me like, I've spent some time with all of these panelists here, and that humility is so important to how each of you have done what you've done. Brian, would you agree with that in terms of, I know it's, is that just being humble and being real and authentic? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I don't think it's humility just for humility's standpoint, because it's a nice thing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, at the very beginning of this webinar, we saw that out of Malek. He mentioned about calligraphy. I'm not so great at, it was an incredible trait of humility. And it's that thread of humility that actually allows you to value others. It allows you to encourage others to speak up. It allows you to get better answers to their questions. And so humility is actually it's not just about being nice, and that's a nice trait. Yeah. It actually is very strategic in leadership to allow you to get better results and accomplish your goals.
Yep. That's well said. And you actually just gave me a great intro to Malek. So Malek, can you think of a defining moment in your leadership past that has impacted the way you lead today?
Yes, definitely. I think I mentioned it before that I had a very difficult year, that I was running the hospital, business as usual, things are fine. I was not expecting, that turbulence. But one day that outbreak came, and it was really a defining moment it was a shock for the hospital. The hospital was shut down for almost 1 month. So it was a shock for everyone. So we learned a lot. So you can imagine that, from the ministers, from even the assistant of the WHO visited our hospital just to check the situation. It was that hard. So we have an expert from all over the world, and it was really difficult. But that really shake us as an organization. It waked us up. It was really a different perspective. We saw a different opinions. We learned not to be defensive. We learned also to listen to the others. So it was an eye opener for us. And from that moment, we started really actually building our strategies, building our plans based on what happened there. So if you also don't plan very well, that's the scenario that you will end up there. So it was an eye opener for us. It was really a difficult moment. That was in 2013. So from that moment, I think we even decided to go for annual education sessions. We have orientation for our teams. We sent our caregivers to abroad to get training. And we have also so many learning lessons learned from that experience. So for me, that was the most maybe difficult time, but I think at the same time we learned a lot out of it.
Yeah, Malek, thanks so much for sharing that. And I have to tell you, I know I mentioned to you before, I love your background, and I know you've taken a lead on a number of causes professionally and personally. And when I think the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia decided to let women drive, you were the first to have your wife drive you to work, and you tweeted it out, which I think was just really wonderful. And it was great to see it, a big smile on your face. And my question around this is the following. I want to follow up with you on the question of humility, because as Brian said, you seem like such a humble, authentic guy. And we haven't physically met in person yet, but I'm delighted that we're able to do this via Zoom today. My question is, and it's one that one of our audience members just tweeted out to us, how does humility and ego coexist? How do you manage both of them?
I think I have two challenges actually, because I was young at that age, and still I am. I think I am young. Plus, I have the family name of the same owner of the hospital, so I have challenges. So if you say he is the son of the owner, that comes with a certain perspective. So people will think that you are some guy who's a rich guy who's coming to run the hospital just because he is the son of that owner. And at the same time, also he is young, and that comes also that time really difficult. Now we see young leaders in our region, but I think it comes. It needs time. It needs training. Actually, sometimes people think it's authentic. It's authentic, of course. It runs in the family. It has to be a DNA from your own family and environment. But also you have to learn it. Also, you have to practice it. You have to learn what makes other people irritated. Maybe criticizing others, or maybe saying certain words, or maybe even walking in there and smiling, or any small gestures with huge difference in how people perceive you. So I think that small things make a huge difference. It's sometimes difficult. You wake up, you come in the morning, and see all of the bad news come to you, but you have also to work harder to make it feels for the others that things are fine, and you are smiling to the others. So I think it's the soft skills, plus it's very hard also to maintain it and to be consistent on it, because you can fake it, but it's not working actually.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Beri, another question for you. How do adversity and complexity help us all grow? What can we learn from these situations? And this is a question that we'll ask all three panelists.
Adversity and complexity is so important to show us what we really can do. I think that without that, we tend not to fully challenge ourselves. And I almost always think of this example when I was younger, and this doesn't have to do with medicine. I was jumping off a boat to land on a dock to pull in the boat. And as I was jumping off, I realized I'm not going to reach that dock. And so I held on to the rail. If the week before you had asked me, do a pull-up, I would have said there's zero possibility. But in that situation, certainly I pulled myself right up. And I think that this is what happens in leadership. And you really have to throw yourself out there and see what you can do and not shy away from those challenges or that adversity, but instead really lean in. And I think with COVID, we saw this. Certainly within Cleveland Clinic, and I know worldwide, where things that before we thought, oh, this would never happen in this timeline, when it came to do it, we just did it. And so sometimes these things are scary, but by really just facing it and tackling it and embracing and finding that opportunity in there helps us really excel and show what an organization or an individual can do.
And what comes to mind when I hear that is, hey, I'm an introvert, Beri, and I have trouble getting out of my comfort zone. So what would you tell me?
I would tell you that it's actually much easier for an introvert when they have a purpose, because I'm on those scales an extreme introvert.
Yeah.
And if someone were to tell me to network or meet around, that just doesn't come naturally. But when I have a purpose where this is what I need to do, then I can flex those behaviors and strengths and become very extroverted or relationship building focused around that specific goal.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Brian, how do adversity and complexity help us grow? What can we learn from these situations?
Yeah, I might break that question up because I actually think of adversity and complexity of different things. And so real quick, I think complexity needs to be viewed as a leader, your responsibility actually to make things simple. And so, we do a big thing at Cleveland Clinic London in that no one brings complex problems to the executive team, because if you do, you haven't done your job to simplify it. And so a huge part of leadership is actually simplicity and working through complexity. But adversity, I think, is something different and really speaks to this question. And similar, I think Beri nicely articulated it, and the fact that adversity actually brings out your best and tests you at your limits. And so I think adversity allows you to see things that you yourself, exactly like Beri gave a great story, you yourself didn't even know that you can do. I go back and I think, and we use this a lot at Cleveland Clinic London, my team will tell you they're sick of hearing about John F. Kennedy and going to the moon, but we put this at every executive team meeting, a picture of the moon, because what Kennedy said in 1962 is we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard and because it serves to measure the best of our efforts. And I think that holds true today, that adversity actually brings out the best and actually serves to measure the best of our efforts. And you'll see people be at their best when you have adversity. And we've seen that as a organization at the Cleveland Clinic. We've seen that, across the globe. We've seen people really bring out the best of people.
Yeah, I like how you kind of broke it down into two pieces. I think it's very fair. And you're John F. Kennedy. I think that's a great point in terms of, Brian, share a little bit more around the importance of having a simple aspirational goal that can be shared and messaged throughout your team.
Yeah, well, what I say, there's two things that every human being wants. And what they want is they want meaning and purpose, and they want opportunities to learn and grow. And as a leader, that's your responsibility. And as you are able to supply meaning and purpose, you will drive discretionary effort of the people that are following you from 70% effort to 110 and 120. And I oftentimes think that's my number one responsibility, is to drive discretionary effort. And we do it through meaning and purpose. So I can just tell you, at Cleveland Clinic London, there's 9 words that describe what we're doing. And so anyone who's part of our team knows what our purpose is compassionate caregivers transforming health and care for the world. And if you want to be a part of that, then you come join Cleveland Clinic London. If that doesn't really sound exciting, we're not the place for you. And we happen to be building a 322,000 square foot hospital right behind Buckingham Palace from scratch. It's a big construction project. It gets a lot of attention, but that's not what our team's about. Our team is about transforming health and care for the world, and we'll do it through the hospital.
Yeah. Well said. I think I'm gonna call my wife now and tell her we're moving to London. Will you hire me?
We'd love to have you.
I'm just kidding all the Canadian caregivers on. I love Canada. I love maple syrup and hockey. Okay, Malek, how do adversity and complexity help us grow? What can we learn from these situations?
I think by time, adversity is eventual and is something that inevitable in healthcare. So you will see it. You will see it maybe frequently or more frequent than other industries. But the complexity side, I think, for me, I think it's addictive. Sometimes it's an adrenaline rush thing. So if you don't have a complex things to solve, if you don't have a complex projects, if you don't have challenging things ahead of you, I think you will get bored. So it's a good thing. I don't think it's a tough thing to manage, but I think if you do it, and if you succeed to do it, if you stretch your limits, if you go out from your comfort zone, I think many people will face difficulties in the beginning. But I think if you succeed in the first time, second time, third time, you just will love it and you will go in to repeat it. So there is no boundaries, no limits for any visions or any aspirations. So I think complexity is not of course it's a major challenge, but I think it's not a limit. It's actually a motivational thing. For adversity, I think it's a major part of the industry, and we have to face it. We have to be transparent, and we have to actually lead the staff and manage the staff and make all the available resources and efforts to really to minimize that adversity.
That's well said, Malek. And I'm going to go off script here, so be careful. I should be careful. Under the theme "Exercise is Medicine," I know that you are a National Health Committee and board member of Alfada Sports Club, and I know that you like to scuba dive, and I also know that you like to cycle. Why am I bringing this up now? As a leader, as a CEO, how do you juggle everything and taking care of your brain from a mental health perspective and taking care of your body from a physical health perspective? It seems these activities, cycling and scuba diving and staying active, these can't just be random.
Yeah, so it's actually part of our DNA. We placed it in our vision and our strategic priorities. So we said that we are here to promote wellness and heal illness. Plus, promoting wellness is one of our strategic priorities. But many people, when they see you, spend a lot of time in exercising, it's a waste of time, or sometimes it takes really time, and it will take you away from your family. Sometimes you go diving or something. So it's true, but I think at the same time, when you think about it in a different perspective, when you take it as a metaphor for life, challenge yourself as well and see the results, immediate results, based on your progress and your practice in the field, I think it's really rewarding. It's really motivational. You mentioned the club. So I was a board member and a vice president of a club actually in our region. That club was playing in the second division. No one heard about it. And then we worked on it, and the whole team was really motivated. And within 5 years, we won the national title, the professional league title.
Wow.
So for us, it was really motivational that anything can be possible if you put your heart and brain on it, so you can do it. And personally, I do the same thing. It's when you do cycling, for example, you can do it. I worked with 1 year. I tried to cross the most kilometer possible, and I reached almost 200 kilometers one day. Same thing for the diving. So I was diving for every vacation I have. I went diving. So until I mastered it. So I think it's a great to go out from your routine life, but at the same time, you relate to your work, and it's a great motivational tool. It's not a waste of time. When you go back, you will come motivated. You can envision anything. You can do it actually when you do it in a very small scale, in a cycling or a diving or even jogging or anything else. You can do it in life. So it's just a great metaphor actually of life.
Yeah, that's well said. And if you need a ping pong player for the sport club, you just let me know. I'll be your best friend.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Beri, what's the one thing you wish could be different, but is the reality of the role that you're in?
It's a great question. I would have to say, I wish I could maintain the types of relationships that I've had with people in my department or institute that I had. And I'm in a little bit of a unique situation in that I grew up here, I did fellowship here, and then I was attending for quite some time before I had any leadership role. So a lot of my social circle has been from individuals in my particular department or institute and colleagues. And as you really go up and rise the ranks and then start supervising people and even supervise their supervisors, it changes the relationship. And there can be some loneliness around that and times where you're excluded, and rightfully so. This is no plea for invitations, but it is something that can be challenging. I've combated that by really engaging with friends that I've had in other parts of my life that are disconnected from work entirely. So friends from college, and that's been also very meaningful because they see and know me just for who I am, with really no reflection on a leadership role.
That's really helpful. And you know, it's interesting, even just talking to all of you right now, I think as our audience listens in on this, what would you say, Beri, about the value of storytelling as a CEO? Because each of you, I can tell just from this session now, has your own way of delivering a compelling story and an authentic story. What would you say about that, Beri?
I think it's important
Yeah.
in communication and leadership in general. Communication is really paramount, and there's no way to over communicate. And in telling a story and bringing it back to something meaningful, I think it helps people understand. And it really, for me, I try to always get to the why in this type of communication. Because it's it really brings it down to the reasons behind, and that will allow people to understand changes and other things.
That's great. So you're probably thinking I'm picking on you, Beri, right now with this last question, but I'm not. I'm just ingrained in this conversation. And so my last question for you, Beri, then I'm going to move on to Brian and then Malek. If you could do, knowing what you know now, okay? If you could do one thing differently throughout your career, what would that one thing be?
It's something I continue to work on, and I wish I had done it a lot earlier in my career. And that is really prioritizing, not necessarily time, but thoughts and thought processes and the amount of space they take up in your mind. And because as a leader overseeing a number of different areas, there are ways in which small things on the great scheme of things, right, take up a lot of space in your mind because they may affect you personally, or it irks you, or it presses a button for you. And so something that I definitely didn't do and I suffered from, and I continue to work on to this day, is putting everything into a much larger perspective and then consciously allowing only certain amounts of time for really the importance that my brain will say it should take.
That's good. I love that tip. That's a great tip. I'm going to steal that one. Okay, Brian, What's the one thing you wish could be different, but is the reality of the role that you're in?
Yeah, I think throughout these roles in healthcare leadership that we're in, the one thing that's always been frustrating is, unfortunately, everyone doesn't always get better. And the fact that you spend so much time, effort on process, you spend it on culture, but unfortunately, not everyone gets better. And in our healthcare focus, which has been great over the last several years to see the increased focus on continuous improvement, but also with continuous improvement is a reminder that things happen that maybe shouldn't have happened. And to me, that's really frustrating that there's people that, 5 years from now would not have had the same outcome because we keep getting better and better at things. I've always found that really frustrating.
I appreciate you saying that because, I happen to be located in Canada, which is like the land of fair and equal. And sometimes everyone doesn't advance or succeed at the rate that everyone else is. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Knowing what you know now, if you could do one thing differently throughout your career, what would that be?
I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I spent a lot of time in math and science and was very goal-oriented every step of the way to achieve the next goal and make it on this pathway. It closed out, I think, a lot of humanities, which I thought were completely unimportant because I had my goal and I knew what I wanted to achieve. And especially through college and then medical school and residency, when time got a little more constricted, but I always devalued, art, music, reading. And it's been nice, actually. Our boys are older now. We have 3 adult children, and having some more time now and being in England and traveling and learning more history. My advice to my children is actually to pay attention to the humanities, spend some more time on those topics. And I wish I would have done that. My wife and I are trying to make up for it now.
Oh, that's great advice. And of course,
it's not just, again, because it's interesting. I think it actually makes you a better person and makes you therefore a better leader.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know you're a big sport fan, so I'm sure you would also advise going to see a Notre Dame, Ohio State Buckeye football game.
As long as Notre Dame wins.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't happen.
Hey, Mike, can I just make one comment about storytelling?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it.
And I think the important thing about storytelling is there's a whole science and psychology to how people make decisions. And people, what I've learned, people will make a decision about you before they make a decision about your message. And in your first 2 to 3 minutes, people make a decision on you. And if the decision's no, it doesn't matter what you say. And so, there's a lot of techniques around smiling, actually like not wearing glasses because people want into your eyes. And we don't see it in healthcare so much, but some of the great speakers, you don't even know why they're phenomenal speakers, but they have grabbed your heart in the first 2 to 3 minutes and you're all in. And I think that's the importance, I think, of storytelling. And people always say, go for the heart. And here at the Cleveland Clinic, our heart group gets so much attention. I like to clarify that it's actually you're going after the amygdala, which is part of the brain. It's not the heart, but it's in your amygdala where you really can grab people in those first 2 to 3 minutes. You pull them in, and then after that, use facts to convince. But you have to go after story, and that's the power of storytelling. It's actually scientific. It's not a nice thing to do. It's very scientific to pull people in.
That's great advice. I love that. I'm going to use that too. I'm going to steal that. I'll give credit to both you guys, Beri and Brian. Don't worry. Okay, Malek, what's the one thing you wish could be different, but is the reality of the role that you're in right now?
Well, we live in an area where the workforce are a transitional workforce, so people comes and goes. So that's a major challenge for any healthcare system. So majority of our healthcare workers actually come from abroad. So almost 70–80% from our healthcare workers comes from abroad. So it's a transitional workforce. So it's almost a challenge every year to see a major portion of your workforce going back to their countries or transitioning to other countries. We are living that as a reality because of our maybe geography, because of our location and others. But we are also trying to change that scenario, and we are opening up a new College of Healthcare Sciences within our system. So we will having an educational arm. So we will be changing that. We are helping change that scenario. So we are trying to change it, but it's really devastating. So to see so many workforce to train them and to work on them, and suddenly they go. So it's really disappointing, but it's a reality of the world that we live.
And that's great. And knowing, you're not off the hook either yet, Malek. Knowing what you know now, if you could do one thing differently throughout your career, what would that one thing be?
Well, I think I had great mentors in my career. Beginning of my career, I did not utilize them to the maximum capacity that they have. So if I would have the time to go back, I think I would utilize them. But I have an access to great mentors. Perhaps I did not really connect to them so often, or maybe when you are young, you try to make it by yourself. So you don't go back to the senior guys to ask them a lot of questions. Maybe they will think that you are not doing the right thing. So but it's actually the opposite. They like it when you go to ask them. So they had an open door for me, but I did not maybe utilize it very well. So that's in the professional side. But if I go to the other side, I wish that when I go back to studying healthcare management and healthcare leadership, my dream was to study architecture as well. So if I go back, if I have the time, maybe I would study architecture.
That's great. And by the way, I'm thrilled that you brought up the M word, mentorship. Because quite frankly, I didn't have it in any of my prep notes. Shame on me. But I wanted to ask, so we've heard from you about mentorship, Malek. Thanks for bringing that up. I wanted to ask our two physician leaders this question. In kind of your rise here, how have you thought about mentors? And did you have a great mentor? And was that mentor a clinician? Was that mentor a non-clinician? Like, and what'd you get out of it? And tell our audience, like, I'm an introvert. I don't feel comfortable asking someone to be my mentor. How does this whole thing happen as a mentor? Like, I just threw a lot at you. Brian, you want to go first, and then we'll do Beri?
Yeah, I probably have a strange answer to that question. And similar to the fact that there's many different styles of leadership and you need to be flexible and use different styles of leadership at different times, I think the same is true for mentorship. And that you will have different mentors at different times and use them for different reasons. I was fortunate that my fellowship director, who I spent a year of orthopedic foot and ankle surgery, was a phenomenal human being outside of orthopedics. So he was a really strong mentor for me on the fact you could have a successful medical career and be a unbelievably dedicated, passionate, high integrity, compassionate individual. And so that's one mentor that was really important to me at an influential time. The not awkward, but probably maybe unexpected, the best mentor I have that I still use today that helps me with complex personnel decisions. So I think the majority of, at least my job, I assume others, is actually managing people.
Yeah.
And the person who's taught me more about that than anyone is my wife. And it's in raising our family. It's just unbelievable lessons that I've learned. The one story I tell is like when our son was young and was painting on our wall in our house, and I of course came in and said, Patrick, You're such a bad kid. That's horrible. Why would you do that? And like, she comes and explains to me, hey, he's a great kid. That behavior is really bad. And like, I was like, yeah, that's like God, how did I not think of that? And, and it's a ton of lessons like that. So actually my wife has really been a huge influence on my leadership.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said. Beri?
I agree with Brian. There are different mentors and sponsors for not just different times in your life, but actually different purposes. So I have individuals that I consider a surgical mentor who, with my practice and my surgical career, has provided mentorship. I have others who provide leadership or professionalism advice and help me mentor. I have someone within the organization that I have worked with who has been here longer than I have and can help understand and navigate and talk through certain situations with high confidence, of course. That's been particularly helpful. But I think one of the things for me that has been the most helpful in my career is a type of sponsorship. And that for me involves giving high profile opportunities somewhat early in my career and opening doors for me that as a young female surgeon would otherwise not have opened on their own, and providing me that opportunity where, of course, I had to take that opportunity and decide I need to be better than everyone in order to get essentially that sort of attention and be asked for the next opportunity. And those things for me were really instrumental in having the opportunity. And so I think that's an important part, which now I really try to pass along and say, hey, I have this opportunity. Can you present here? Can you do this on behalf of our team?
Yeah, that's great. That's really well said. And Malek, thanks for bringing this mentorship topic up and kind of leading the way on that. And Brian and Beri, I appreciate that because, at the end of the day, it's much easier to go at things as a team with a group of people rather than by yourself. So having a mentor is critical, and people that support you, which has been great. And I can proudly share. I'm now getting to know Beri. I'm now getting to know Malek, but I've known Brian for a while, and he's one of those people that tapped me on the shoulder years ago and said, "Hey, Mike, I'm supportive of you," and it's meant a lot to me. So I say that publicly in front of the 15,000 people that are on this call right now. Now the audience wants to know. Okay, so we have 12 minutes left. This is great, and thank you. So now we're going to all the questions, and for all the folks that are on, please submit your questions. Or is going to be reviewing them. We will be submitting them to our panelists. So here we go. I'll start with an academic one, and Beri, Brian, Malek, whoever wants to answer it, just chime in. You don't all three have to answer, whatever, if you want to. I had completed the Managing Healthcare Delivery course at Harvard Business School last year, which was fantastic. Are there any courses you would suggest?
I can go for it.
Go ahead, Malek.
So I would suggest two courses. The Samson Academy for Leadership is a great.
We love you, Malek.
It's actually a Stanford course. It's an innovative healthcare leader. I think it's a 7 days leadership course in Stanford. It's a great course, having both the medicine side and the leadership side.
Yeah, Mike, I was fortunate enough for the organization to support me with the Harvard Business School Advanced Management Program. It's actually a 6-week course. But the one thing I took away from that is it had nothing to do with healthcare. And to me, that was incredibly important and transformative in my career. And so my advice would be actually to take a course. If you're interested in healthcare leadership, get out of healthcare and take course in leadership and see other industries and other experiences and learn from that.
And I haven't done very many formal leadership courses myself, and but I have done pretty significant work with coaching, and that for me has been particularly helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Beri. Here's another question. This is a great one because I'm a big believer in, exposing your vulnerabilities will make you stronger. And this is in that theme, if you will. How does one move on from a professional setback such as a demotion?
I think it's important to realize that a lot of times almost all the time, promotions are about fit. They're not about a competition of who's the best person. And so people have, I don't think of people having advantages and disadvantages or positives and minuses. I think of people having attributes, and then do those attributes, are they a good fit for that position? And I think when you think of it that way, you realize it's not that you didn't win the competition, it wasn't the right fit. And I think Beri said it earlier, which is like the number one thing so far I've taken out of this was Beri's stress about how important match is and matching. You know, and I think when you think of it that way, you should not be discouraged. You can be disappointed, but you should not be discouraged.
I agree 100%. And it's cliche almost, when one door closes, another one opens, but it really is true in that it's a time for reflection. It's a time to take a step back and really separate yourself and your value from what happened. A little bit like what Brian was saying, it's not the person, it's the behavior, right? Like what your wife says. But it really is a time to step back and say, what did I feel good about there? What didn't work? And where should I put my efforts? And historically, a lot of people would say, what are your areas for improvement, and focus on those? And I, of course, don't ignore those, but I would advise to see where you're excelling and sharpen those skills and find positions where you can excel using those skills that are innate.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I feel a little bit, I'm aging myself when I say this, I feel a little bit like Ted Koppel asking these questions, but I'm gonna go into the gut with some of this stuff. How have you, and this is probably to Beri, because I'm highly confident Malek and Brian are males. How have you responded to gender bias at the highest levels where you may be the only woman at the table?
Well, first I want to say thank you that this is not a manel itself, and that I'm included here and with our
That's
well.
good.
So appreciate the opportunity. And this is something that I do experience somewhat frequently, but I will say I know that the source of this isn't a purposeful, and it's implicit bias. And so I think first having empathy for the individuals who sort of grown up in the majority culture and what has seemed totally normal and acceptable. And then while I'm in those situations, I do my best to do a great job so that they can understand. And also really I'm very mindful about speech and gender and using correct language as setting an example. And actually, I've seen Brian's a master at this, and in talking about instead of chairman, chairs, instead of we're looking for a man for this or this guy. And I think it's important to model that behavior. And in certain groups where I felt comfort when I heard pervasive language or implicit bias, I just politely called it out because I don't think that person recognized it, and they happily changed that.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. This one just came in. I'm at mid-career. What crossroads or moment decision propelled you forward to executive leadership? In your opinion, how long should one stay in a mid-level leadership role?
I'm not sure about the second part of that question. How long stay in mid-level leadership? I'm not sure that's always up to the individual to decide that. I can just tell you my personal story is, my goal was to be a full-time orthopedic surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic for 35 to 40 years. And that's all I ever wanted. About 10 or 12 years into my career, the chief of staff was a gentleman named Joe Hahn, a wonderful person. He called and asked me if I wanted to run a committee that would take care of all bad behavior by doctors. And he told me to think about it. I went down to my chairman of orthopedics and I said, hey, Dr. Hahn asked me if I wanted to run this committee. He told me to think about it, so I might get back to him tomorrow. The chairman of orthopedics, Joe and I at that time, said to me, hey, listen, you don't understand how it works. You actually say yes, and then you go think about it. And I just say that story because I think I had no idea what I was getting into. That was my crossroads. And I actually really enjoyed the committee. I enjoyed trying to help doctors be better. And I had no idea. And so I think early on, you have to say yes to a lot of opportunities. Some of them will pan out, some of them won't be a great match, but that was my crossroads. And it's the reason why I'm sitting here today with wonderful people like all of you on the screen.
Thanks. This is great. It seems like we've got a lot of people on here on the call today that are, I would say, looking for more, right? Looking to achieve more in the workplace, professionally, develop themselves. This is a question. This is a good. What helped you the most to reach your current position? And this is a very difficult question because I think it actually, like as Brian said, try to make the complex simple and easy. So you can go a lot of different ways with this. So if I were to ask each of you, we have 3 minutes left. If I were to ask each of you, what's the one thing that you believe has helped you the most to reach your current position in your work environment, what would that be?
I think.
Go ahead, Malek.
I think for me, I think discipline and self-awareness. If you are self-aware and you are really managing yourself very well and you know where to go and where you have a weakness and where you have your strength, and you are disciplined as well and you are consistent in your work, I think you will reach whatever goals that you set for yourself. But when you say something and then a few days later you forget it or you don't really walk the talk, I think you will never reach to your goals.
That's great. Brian?
I think it's important that you think about why you want roles. And if you want titles and you want specific roles, you're not the right person.
Yeah.
If you Bill George wrote a book called True North, where he forces you to go back through your entire life as a child, all the way through and figure out what's your thread and what's your drive. And I think once you figure out what your drive is, then that allows you, no matter what roles, to pursue that. For me, I grew up and I love seeing my mom as a nurse and see people come sit on our step at our house. We lived in a neighborhood where no doctors lived, and sitting there and seeing her, try to help people and have an impact. And so I think figure out what your thread and what your goal is, and then pursue that. Don't pursue titles and don't pursue positions. Pursue, what impact or what your goal is.
That's great. I'm glad you said that's a great answer, because the next question I was going to ask, but I know we have 1 minute less, and I want to go to Beri, by the way, was one question that the audience asked was, what are the motives pushing you doing your job year after year? And I think you answered that, Brian. Beri, you will be the last, and you will be the concluder, if you will. So how would you answer that question?
It's a combination, really, of what Malek and Brian have said, in that, ironically, I have 0 5-year plan. I'm probably a reluctant leader. And what I look for I really focus that time is finite. You don't ever get it back. And so I focus on how I'm spending my time. Is this something that I find meaningful? Is this project going to bring meaningful change to others? Is this project going to help the organization and help our patients? And if those things inspire me, then I go after them. But I would never go after just a title for the title, because sometimes there's that mismatch. And again, knowing yourself authentically is the key for that.
Well, it's 12 o'clock, and I want to thank three three groups. First, Beri, Brian, and Malek, it's an honor to share this with you. So thank you for agreeing to join, even when you heard that it was me that was going to be interviewing you. That's number one. Number two, Aura and Matthew for setting this up, incredible. And number three, to the 15,000 people listening in from 32 different countries. Amazing questions. Thanks for tuning in. Aura, will there be another one of these one day? Probably without me, but will there be another one?
Absolutely. And a quick reminder to the audience. So at the conclusion of this webinar, which is in a few seconds, there's going to be a survey link that is going to show up in your browser. So please, we encourage you to fill that out, because then that helps us figure out what are the next topics that we're going to bring to you. And we only want to bring topics that move you, that make you passionate, and that drive you. So, yes, Mike.
Or just a huge appreciation to Mike Kessel, who put a lot of time.
Of course,
into
yes.
and did a fantastic job. Seriously, thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
You're very well. Thanks to all. I appreciate the kind words. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.